All right, welcome everybody. Today we're going to be learning how to program gravity finally. So, very first thing you're going to want to do is log into Scratch. And when you go up to Scratch here, I hit the little create button right next to it and create yourself a blank project. I would start off totally fresh on this one. And right at the very top, you're going to call this one gravity. And you might want to put in final because this is going to be one of the final projects in this class. You're going to want to hit the share button right here next to it, the orange share button, and share it right away. Down here, you can go to Add to Studio. And when you hit Add to Studio, you'll find one that's called Gravity in here. I don't have one in mine, but you'll see one called Gravity, and you just add it to that studio. I'll go back to See Inside here. Remember, if you want to switch back and forth between those pages, it's See Project page right there, and then you can go See Inside. So that's how you have those two different views. All right, so what we are going to do today is show you how to move this cat around with having gravity affect it. The very first thing to do is let's get this cat moving. So we'll come to our events, and we'll start off with the classic, when green flag is clicked. All right, the next thing we want to do is create a couple of if-then statements. This is the most efficient way to create motion, is using these if-then statements. We'll use an if-then statement that's able to sense a key being pressed. So in our light blue sensing, there's key space pressed. We can do that. Let's go move our cat to the right first, which is positive on the x-axis. So here's the right arrow. And then the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to change x, which is left to right. I'm going to change x by 10. So I'm going to go back up here to motion. And it's the exact same thing as saying move 10 steps. The reason why I'm not using move 10 steps is because I want you to get used to using the x-axis, left to right, versus y-axis, up to down. So they have that move 10 steps for little kids who don't understand that yet. But you guys are in middle school, so you're all good with that. So you want to come down here, change x by 10. That's the block we want right there. And now, when the green flag is clicked, it doesn't do anything. Why? Because we don't have a forever loop. So the pressing the right arrow would only work when I'm pressing the green flag. So if I hold down the right arrow key and press the green flag, now it works. But we want that to always work, so we're going to go to Control and put a forever loop on it. And now, when I hold down that right arrow after I hit the green flag, my cat moves really effortlessly to the right. The next thing then is we want our cat to be able to move to the left. So we could rebuild this same thing. Keep in mind you could also right-click this if-then statement and duplicate it and do it this way as well. And then you can switch that from right arrow to left arrow. So this is a little shorter ways to do it. The problem, though, is if I press the left arrow, the cat will still move to the right. So if I hit the green flag and hit the left arrow, the cat actually moved completely off the screen. Why? Because we're telling the cat to move 10 steps towards positive x, not negative. And in the case of we want it to go backwards, we want negative 10. Because now, when we hit the green flag and I hit that left arrow, now we have a moonwalking cat. So he's doing like the Michael Jackson moonwalk right there. All right. What if we want our cat to be able to turn around? Something that we can do there then is we can go to motion, and there's this point in direction. So point in direction 90 is the default. And if I click on that, you see it's pointing an arrow to the right. So that's the direction our cat would face whenever the right arrow is clicked. However, if we want to do the left arrow, now we're going to go point in direction, and we're going to go negative 90. Okay, so now we hit the green flag and move it. Oh dear, you see the problem here? Our cat flips upside down when he does that. Okay, so we need to change something else too. In the blue blocks, there is one called Set Rotation Style. It's towards the very bottom. It's the last big block in the dark blue. And we're going to set that rotation style left to right. I'm not going to put it inside an if-then statement. I'm actually going to put it in the forever loop on top of the if-then statements. Now when I hit the green flag, now we have a cat that can move right and left. However, that cat still can't jump, which is a problem. So this is where we start getting into something more complicated. Well, how do we make the cat jump? Well, we want it to be able to move up. Well, left is negative x, right is positive x, up is positive y, down is negative y. So we need the cat to be able to move positive y steps in order to jump. But then the trick is also getting the cat to come back down. All right. So we need to program in something for the keys themselves. Which key is going to be causing it to jump? We could use space. We could use up arrow. It could be whatever you want. But before we use that, what we need to do is get ourselves an if-then statement that's dedicated to jumping. I'll drop it in here with our others. We'll go to sensing. And when, in this case, I'm going to use up arrow. I could have used space. That would have been fine too. When that up arrow is pressed, what we're going to do is hopefully move y. We're going to change y by something. So I'm going to go motion. In this case, we're going to go change x. No, we want change y by 10. And now when I hit the green flag and I hit the up arrow, the cat can move up as well. I could probably program something just as likely for it to be able to move downwards too. So the next part here is if we need it to move down, there's lots of ways to do that. But I'm going to show you my favorite way to do this. And again, there's no one right way to do any of this, but this is a way that works wonderfully. And it's going to take a lot of attention to detail here. So that's why I have this in video format, so that you can pause this and go back over this as you need it. So we are going to jump in and grab ourselves an event. Green flag is clicked. We're going to do a separate one. And then I'm going to go into my variables, the orange blocks down here. And I'm going to actually make a variable. And I'm going to call this variable gravity. Now, just because I put gravity as the name doesn't mean that it now works like gravity. No, it's still a variable that it just happens to be called gravity. Until we tell gravity what it is, gravity doesn't know what to believe in itself. So there is the next thing we're going to do is we're going to set our y. Let's see. You know what I messed up on? Instead of calling it gravity, here's what you could call this. Sorry, I'm a little sleepy today. I could right-click that and rename the variable. This will make more sense for many of you. Because rather than just having gravity that pulls you down, we're going to use y velocity. Because when you jump, you're going to be doing the opposite of gravity, right? You're going to be jumping up into the air. So for our y velocity, we want to set that variable when the green flag is clicked, specifically to 0. That means our object isn't falling, it's not jumping, it is simply staying still. So that way, when we click it, the idea is that that cat would fall down. Now let's get into the gravity side of things. So if our key up arrow is pressed, what we're going to do is set our velocity to something else. So y was staying still. The cat's not moving up or down right now. But if we change this to y velocity, and I need to change this to y velocity too up here, my apologies. If we change that y velocity right now to 10, let's see what happens when I press the up arrow. Okay, yeah. The cat moves upward at a rate of 10. The next part here is we can also still keep that change by y. I'm just going to flip-flop those two. It just makes things just a little less glitchy. Okay. We're ready for one more really big coding block now. We're going to start a new green flag. So we're going to come up here to our events, grab a green flag. And in here, we want an if-then statement. Now we are eventually going to get rid of that green flag, but it's a good placeholder for right now. So if our y velocity, and that's where I come down to our variables, and you see I have y velocity here. Well, I can't put it, this oval one into that diamond-shaped hole there. I'm going to need some sort of operator. So in my operators, I could go something like this. Let's say if y velocity is less than, let's go -10. Then we can go into our motion. We can change y by y velocity. And we can also change our y velocity by -0. So under controls here, we're going to go, let's see here. Oh, whoops, I'm sorry. It's not under controls. It's under variables, dark orange. We're going to change my y velocity. And I'm just going to set this to 0 right now. And then under motion, we're going to tell our sprite to change its y location, it's how high up and down it is, by y velocity. So I'm going to come down here and go change y by, and then we're going to go back to our variables and go y velocity. Again, feel free, you can pause this as much as you want in order to catch your breath, try and get caught up. No need to try and take this all on at the same time. Now there's one more thing in here that's going to be important. A couple more things, I should say. The problem is this doesn't cover everything that we need. Because like if I hit our green flag, our cat moves up, but it's still not moving down. And so the way we're going to fix this is instead of using the traditional if-then statement, we're actually going to use something called an if-then-else statement. And I'll move this, these objects over into it. Okay. Now you might be thinking, well, what's the big deal here? Now I'm going to get rid of that green flag just for the moment. So what's the big deal here with the else statement? Well, what we're going to use the else for is if, I'm going to need a little more space here. So if our sprite is not touching the ground, we want it to do something else. And the reason for this is because otherwise you could jump mid-air. And we want you to only be able to jump when you're jumping off of the ground. So in here, variables, we can change my variable, in this case my y velocity. And I'm going to put this to -1. And this basically is going to tell the computer how fast I want gravity to impact my sprite. And then I'm also going to duplicate that change by y. We'll change y by y velocity. Okay. If something is touching the ground, like this, if our cat is touching the ground, we're going to grab our touching under sensing here and pull that in. And the problem is I don't have any ground yet. So I'm going to need to create one, because that's also what we need up here, is if not touching ground. So let's create a sprite. I'm going to custom build one using choose a sprite. I'm going to just paint one in this case. I'm going to use the paintbrush there, and I'm going to paint it. And I'm going to pick a nice color here. And let's create a box. Okay, so we got a nice box there. And we are going to call this sprite, instead of calling it sprite 2, we're going to call it the ground. Just keep in mind today when we're coding, you're not going to use any code on the ground. All your code's going to go into your cat. So if I go back to our cat here, and I'm on the code, we need if not touching the ground. So we'll pull in this one here. Set this to the ground. And then we'll come down to here to the next one. Oh, and we got it right here. Okay, so we know what we're going to do if we don't touch the ground. We're going to change that y velocity by -1. But if we are touching the ground, then we're going to change our y velocity by 0 because our object is standing still. Go velocity there. We'll change this into a 0. Now there's one last really big part to all this, and that is if you go to My Blocks, we are going to make a block. This block, it's a custom block. We are going to call it gravity. And we are going to run this without screen refresh. And what that does is it prevents objects from moving through each other. The computer recognizes the objects touching each other as soon as possible versus only checking every so many times per second. And now we're going to call this gravity right here. And let's see if it works. Let's see if we got anything that works in here. So we told the computer what gravity is. We know how to move our object around. There's one little thing that's missing off of this short piece of coding, and that is a big key. Forever. Because right now I can't move my cat at all. Forever, if I go to gravity, under my blocks, it's down here. It'll also show up under variables. Now, I think we are in business. And you'll see the cat is able to jump around. And when it falls, it increases in speed until it reaches its maximum velocity, which happens to be 11 in this case. All right, so we've got a couple of issues here that we want to figure out in terms of how we want our cat to touch or interact with the ground. Okay, so the last thing that we're going to need to do is, in order to get a functional cat going here, before we add in anything extra to this, is under our forever loops in our original coding here, when the green flag is clicked forever, we set the rotation and we do all that stuff. There is something that we want to do to change the up arrow. And we are going to add something to this. And that is under control, if we're going to put an if-then statement on the outside of this if-then statement. It's going to be a double if-then statement. And what we're going to do with this one is if we are under sensing, touching the ground, then we should be able to do the rest of this. Except for the fact that our cat is hanging down below. It's a bit of a problem. So let me figure that out. Oops, and I think I see where my problem was. I forgot to put this change y by y velocity inside of this if-then statement. So let me try that again. We're going to hit the green flag here. Grab our cat. Uh-oh, still falling through the ground. So we're going to figure this out. At the very beginning, we could have the cat go to, under motion, have it go to a specific set of coordinates like x0 and y. positive 215 whenever that green flag is clicked. But we're still having the problem of it falling behind. So what is the issue there? Let's figure it out. Oops, and I see my problem. I made one mistake in here. Be careful of this. This is really easy to do. You have change y velocity by 0, or negative 0 in this case. It means the same thing. Change y velocity by negative 1 here. But down here, rather than changing y velocity by 0 when it's touching the ground, what we actually want is set y velocity to 0. And that other one we'll delete. We'll make sure that changes to y velocity. And then when we hit the green flag, now we have an object that can land on the ground. All right, this is your goal for today. See if you can get this built up. If you can, then you can start playing around with other options, like building background objects and things like that. For your cat to climb, you could create objectives. There's all sorts of different things you could try. All right, I hope you enjoyed this quick little tutorial on how to create gravity inside of Scratch with terminal velocity. You'll notice my cat can never go more than negative, I believe it's 11 in this case, based on the parameters that we put in. All right, take care.